welcome back to Untamed Minds. If you're new here, welcome, welcome. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. I am Jessica. I am your host, and just wanted to remind everyone the reason why I decided to open up my podcast is because I wanted to build a platform to talk about mental health, as I feel like it's really important for us to have discussions around that topic, especially within our Hmong community. I would like to see all of us, come together and strive to destigmatize mental health and just normalize talking about it. So, today, I have a really special guest. Um, this person and I, we've known each other for oh, quite some time now. Let's say like about a year or so. We both used to work together, and she has became like my really good friend. So I'm glad to introduce her today, especially with our session. We're going to be talking about, like identity crisis or just questions about your identity as a Hmong person living in America and how that affects your mental health. So, if we can all welcome Cassandra. Cassandra, if
Hi.
you can, yeah, talk a little bit more about yourself, maybe like give us like a fun fact.
Sure. So my name is Cassandra, first generation Hmong American. So I was born here in the US. I'm from Wausau, Wisconsin, like central Wisconsin, and I still live here. Yeah, I guess like honestly, a big part of my identity or like my journey to finding myself was that I did have a lot of internalized racism. Like that's a big part of my identity and my life experience. And so I've been pretty open with that. And so that's why you wanted me on here today to talk more about that, because that's a topic that I could talk a lot about. And I feel like a lot of our
Mhm.
Hmong American community can relate to that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I mean, obviously, this is a topic that you're passionate about, and that's why, I thought that it'd be great for you to come on here and talk a little bit more about that. And I think this is something that a lot of people can relate to. Um, but before we get started, just I have a quick icebreaker question. So the question is, if you can have dinner with like a fictional character, it could be like anyone, who would it be and why?
Okay, girl, I was thinking so hard about this. I was like, who would I pick? And honestly, I was thinking, what if I had dinner with Napoleon Dynamite?
Oh my, wait, who is that?
He's like a really, really awkward character from the movie Napoleon Dynamite. And I'm like, I feel
Oh.
like, I don't know, I'm awkward, he's awkward, but like he's really funny. And I tend to do well with awkward people because I'm also awkward.
Mhm.
But I just thought I think that'd be a really funny experience. Yeah, she's from a comedy movie, so it's like
Oh my
really
god.
funny, dry humor, but it's really awkward too. So yeah. But
Yeah,
what about you?
yeah. Oh my god, dude. I think I've said this before. I said Harry Potter, but you know what? Let me stray away from Harry Potter. Have you seen the movie Matilda?
Oh yes. Oh yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
maybe Matilda, because
Yes.
I wanna see her use her powers, her magic.
Oh my
We
gosh,
could talk about
I would love to
yeah.
have dinner with Miss Honey.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it'd be so sweet. Yeah, but so you can have it with Miss Honey, and I'll have it with, Matilda. But
Yes.
yeah, the reason why is because she's really smart, and I
Right.
feel like we can bond over, like, trauma like, growing up from, a family that don't really give a crap about you.
No, for real,
Yeah,
for real.
so
Like the way that she was so smart that it helped her navigate like
mhm,
her family trauma. Yeah.
yeah. Well, thank you for, answering the icebreaker question. So
Mhm.
I know you mentioned that, you have a lot of like internalized racism. Would you mind telling the audience like what that means and give us like an example of what you
Sure.
experienced?
So it can be described, internalized racism can be described as like hating your own racial group as a result of the racism that you experience.
Mhm.
So for me, it definitely looked like being ashamed of being Hmong because I grew up in central Wisconsin, a very predominantly white area, grew up with classmates who were predominantly white, and just like the microaggressions you get from them, just like the way that they dehumanize you or treat you like you're not there, like treat you like you don't exist, or just like disregard your entire existence, like that really affected me growing up a lot. It made me feel like ashamed and embarrassed. Um, yeah, so I definitely, growing up, intentionally wanted to like distance myself from my Hmong culture. And the way that
Mhm.
that manifested was like me hanging out with like only white people or like not wanting to speak Hmong or something like that.
Mm.
So those are like some of the main examples of like how my internalized racism manifested in my
Mhm.
life.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. That's such a powerful story. Um, I mean, like, kind of just reflecting on my own experiences right now, I never realized that I was well, like, I ever experienced, internalized racism until, like, you kind of explained it. But my story is a little bit different. I've been around Hmong people for a very, very long time. Like, growing up, from elementary school to middle school and high school, I went to Hmong school, so
Hmm.
every time so, like, after that period of my life, and then I started going to, like, college, I was alone, I was by myself, I couldn't make any friends, and then my first, like, big girl job, I was ashamed to even talk about, like, my own culture because I was scared that I wouldn't fit in. So I find it so I find it very interesting how, like, our stories are very opposite, but
Hmm.
also can like, we both can experience, internalized, like, racism.
Yeah, like
So
when you said like you didn't want to talk about being Hmong because you were like ashamed of it, or like that's kind of how I felt around like white people because I feel like they never wanted to acknowledge that I was a different race than them. So, but because I was so Americanized, it was like they treated me like I was white, which I guess was what I wanted. But also, I felt so invisible because it was like that I couldn't talk about myself or like my home life or like what I eat for food at home. Or I don't know, it
Mhm,
was just like, it was weird because like I did want to be friends with white people, but it was uncomfortable because they didn't seem to want to acknowledge that like I'm clearly a different race than them, or like
yeah,
they it was just weird to not have it be acknowledged. So I felt like a big part of me was not acknowledged by them, not wanting to
mhm.
acknowledge that clearly a different race than them.
Kinda going back to, you know, your point of being ashamed or, like, both of our points of, like, being ashamed of, like, who we are, like, we couldn't be ourselves around, like, certain people, especially white people. I remember when I brought, like, boiled chicken to work for, like, lunch and stuff, and I would see, a lot of eyes looking at me or, like, I would just feel their judgment, and then ever since then, like, I stopped packing food from home.
I just thought of another example of like how the internalized racism manifested in me too. Obviously, like Eurocentric beauty standards played a lot in how I saw myself because I was like, oh, like I'm not white, I'm not blonde, I don't have blue eyes, I'm not skinny like them, I don't have
Mhm,
like their face, like I have like a round face and a flat nose. I never could have thought that I would be seen as like beautiful because of
mhm,
the white beauty standards that this country has. So
yeah,
that definitely also affected like my self-esteem and my self-perception too, was like the beauty standards.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, I feel you with that, and it's sad because I mean, it really is an internal thing, but it is sad that like the beauty standards these days is something that, like young girls or even like women our age kind of look up to. Like, like if we don't fit those standards, then we're ugly. And
Hmm.
I think it's really sad because, I've been in those shoes. Sometimes I would look at like, white girls, I'm like, wow, I wish I was tall like them. I wish um, I had fair skin like them or like it's just these little things, but I think
A
it's
double
also because
eyelid.
yeah,
Hmm.
like a really pretty, nose bridge, big eyes, and a structured face. And I think it also stems from, like, like, even I don't know if your parents ever told you this, but I've heard a couple of times where, like, my parents would be like, "Oh, you need to understand that, like, you're not white, that's why, like, you have to work, um, double the, the load that they have to. So it's like they always put white people on a pedestal that I started doing it too,
Mm,
and then I started comparing myself to them, and it was just really bad.
mhm.
Um, and it took me a long time to just realize and acknowledge that, like, they are not any more than me.
Right.
Uh,
Okay,
yeah.
let's talk about that because in the
Okay.
process of me like deconstructing my internalized racism, I realized like, oh yeah, like why would I want to be like them? You know, because going
Mm,
back to like at least with us Hmong people, like we have a connection to our culture and we know our heritage and like we can trace back our heritage and like our cultural traditions and stuff. And being in touch with your culture can tell you so much about yourself and who you are. I want to be more in touch with my Hmong side, or I want to learn more about my culture. And I feel so lucky that we have this like desire to want to be in touch with our culture because it is a big part of our identity. Like, how could I ever want to like shut that out? Or like, I don't know. I guess I just realized like, oh yeah, like I don't want to be like them because like I don't want to be disconnected with that part of my identity, you know? Like, yes, like racism from white people contributed to my internalized racism, but I will also say like the way that I grew up, I feel like I was only ever exposed to like the toxic parts of Hmong culture. So that was another
mm,
reason why I wanted to distance myself so much from it because I felt like I only ever saw the bad sides. I never got to see the beauty of it. And because our parents, they or like my parents, they didn't really raise us too much like into the Hmong culture, like teaching us like the traditions and the ways and stuff because we grew up more Americanized, then I really didn't get to see like our heritage or like the beauty of our culture. So I was only
mhm,
ever exposed to like the bad sides of it, like the patriarchy, the misogyny, or like alcoholism. Like I was only ever exposed to like those sides of the culture. So that's also what contributed to me wanting to distance myself from
mhm.
the Hmong culture too.
Yeah, but I feel like it's also like you were exposed to the negative things about it because honestly speaking, like that's what mainly the Hmong culture is, it's very patriarchal. Like, a lot of alcohol is involved, whether it's a funeral, wedding, even a simple birthday party, like it has to
Yeah.
be alcohol. Alcohol has to be involved in everything, and
Right.
I feel like at first it wasn't a culture thing to, like, the smaller events, but it became a culture thing because people made it a culture
Right.
thing, which just sucks. But yeah, so I understand where you're coming from, but I know you mentioned that, you kind of started seeing, like, the beauty of it at, like, like, later on in life. Would you mind telling me, like, what specifically kind of drew your attention to see the beauty of the Hmong culture, and, like, how old were you when you started seeing that?
Yeah. So, I can start with like when my journey started to uh, like deconstructing my internalized racism. So it wasn't until I went to college, like
Mhm,
my sophomore year of college, when I took a class called the sociology of race and ethnicity, and that's when I learned about the term internalized racism. And when I learned about that term, that's when like everything changed for me because I was like, wait, this is my exact experience. Like, because I guess before then I never attributed my dislike for the Hmong culture to the broader system of racism. And so once I learned that like racism and white supremacy is what kind of mm, like that was like the cause of like what I was feeling, but I didn't know it at the time until I learned about internalized racism. So that was kind of like when everything changed for me because I was like, wait, like if this is the reason why I feel this way, then I'm going to deconstruct it.
from what I'm hearing is that, like, before you learned about internalized racism, and, like, white supremacy, you were ashamed of the Hmong culture, like, your own heritage. You wanted to fit in with, like, the white folks because you were exposed to, like, the negative side of it. But then as you learned about white supremacy and internalized racism, that's when you kind of things kind of click for you to understand a little bit more about yourself and for
Mhm.
you to open up your mind to see the beauty of our Hmong culture then. That's what I'm hearing from you?
Right, right. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So,
Yeah.
yeah, learning about internalized racism, like that's what changed everything for me because I was like, okay, like now I know the actual source of my
Mhm,
insecurities. The source of my insecurities isn't that the Hmong culture is bad. The source of my insecurities is that I am a victim of racism, you know? So,
mhm,
um, but yeah, so that's another thing that helped me like get more into the Hmong culture was like another college class I took that same year. It was like Introduction to Religion. And we actually did like a short unit about shamanism. And that was
mhm,
my first time ever really learning about shamanism because my family, they grew up Christian, but we didn't go to like church often or anything, but we definitely weren't shamans. So I didn't have any sort of knowledge or familiarity with shamanism. And so when I first learned about shamanism in that class, we like watched a documentary. It's called The Split Horn. It's about this like Hmong family who moved to America and the father is a shaman. Um, and I feel like that was really transformative for me because I got to see like the beauty of shamanism as like a spirituality. Um, and I was like, wow, like it's so beautiful that in our traditional culture, there's so much focus on like the health of our spirit. Like that's something I never grew up with before. And so just learning about it, I was like, whoa, that's so beautiful. Like it is important for us to take care of our spirit. That was another
mhm.
thing that helped me really realize like the beauty of our culture.
Wow, that's a really powerful story. I mean, yeah, kind of compared it to my experiences. I mean, like, my parents, we and my family, we practice like shamanism. So growing up, that's all I've ever known. So I actually did not like it. Like I wanted to stay away from it because kind of like you, I saw the negative side of that religion, like the patriarchal side, like, us women serving the men and not being able to sit with them and eat at the table, cleaning up after the men while the men drink around and, hang out. Um, I was sick and tired of it, So, like, yes, it is beautiful to take care of like the spiritual side of things. But I think in terms of like the logistics, like of like the actual action of like doing things to take care of your spiritual side, it's a lot of freaking work.
Mm.
So, I mean, like, yeah, there's a silver lining. I feel like.
Yeah, yeah, I could
Mhm,
definitely understand like your perspective because for me, like it was easier to see the beauty of it because I was learning about shamanism in a college class. I wasn't actually
mhm,
like going to like the hooplies and stuff like that.
mhm.
So yeah. Um,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
we kind of talked a little bit more about, you being like confused about like your own identity, as a Hmong woman going to or like hanging out with like white friends. And I think you brought up a really good point, like learning about it and actually experiencing it, it's very, very, very different.
Mhm.
Um, because you when you experience it, you get that firsthand knowledge, right? But if you just learn about it, when you learn about it in college or in like a class, they usually tell you the beautiful parts of it. They
Right,
don't
right,
talk about the negative parts of it because
right,
that's just how the system is?
right.
Um, so yeah, like I get why you would think that it's beautiful, and like I do agree with you, it can be beautiful, but man,
Mhm.
there's also a dark side to it as well.
Right.
Mhm. So, in terms of, your cultural background, right? Like, how has your cultural background influenced like your sense of identity? And have there ever been moments where you struggle to like reconcile with your Hmong heritage with like other parts of your identity?
Yeah, so growing up like wanting to be distant from Hmong culture and stuff, I have always struggled with like balancing my Hmong identity with my American identity. Like for example, I don't know how to speak Hmong. Like I never knew how to speak Hmong. Most of that was because I didn't want to learn how to speak Hmong. But then yeah, now as I'm getting more in touch with Hmong culture, I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely now I'm feeling feelings of like shame and guilt for not knowing how to speak Hmong, or like my grandma is always like, "Oh my gosh, like why don't you know how to speak Hmong?" And I'm like, Well, also, you guys didn't teach me, but also I recognize, like, my role I played in that, like, I didn't wanna learn too.
Mhm,
So in that sense, it's hard, but, like, working at a Hmong organization helped me a lot with, like, learning new vocabulary words, and just being, like, surrounded by Hmong culture a lot, so that helped. Um,
mhm,
but yeah, I guess, like, it is hard to balance Hmong American identity because it's like, okay, I don't know how to speak Hmong. I'm not that in touch with Hmong culture, so I feel like I'm not Hmong enough, or other Hmong people will like shame me for not knowing how to speak Hmong. So that always made me feel bad. But it wasn't until I really started like my own mental health healing journey that I finally realized like, okay, like I don't need to be offended when people shame me for not knowing how to speak Hmong because at least from my perspective, this is how I reframe my thinking. I realized that like, oh, they're just shaming me because they feel insecure about not being able to maintain the Hmong culture. And so I understand where their feelings of shame are coming from. So it's not my burden to bear the shame that they're
mhm,
putting onto me. It's more like the way I look at it is like I think they just feel insecure that our culture is dying. And so they're
mhm.
putting that feeling onto me. But for me, I'm just like I'm not going to attach my sense of self-worth to what other people have to say about it. Yeah.
No, I understand what you're saying, because, I've witnessed a couple times, like, my partner doesn't know how to speak Hmong that well either, and, like, there'd be times when he would try to speak Hmong, and I would hear, like, OGs, like, say, like, "Oh my gosh, like, your boyfriend doesn't know how to speak Hmong," like, they would laugh at him, and I would feel upset because it's like, he's trying. At least he's trying to conversate with you or, he's learning, like, why instead of laughing at him, why don't you teach him?
Yep.
And so, like so that's what I've been doing. Sometimes we just listen to Hmong songs and then I'll pause and be like, "Hey, what does this mean?" He does understand some words, so it's like I understand. I can like empathize with what you went through because I see it like from my partner, and not just that, but like
Mhm.
even my cousins. Um, like some of my cousins, they don't know how to speak Hmong, so they can't conversate with like my grandma, and then my grandma would like just not talk to them or she would judge them. Um,
Mhm.
and there was a point in my life too where like I became really rusty at speaking Hmong. Um, and I think it's also because I remember when I was like in first or second grade, I got put in like ESL or ELL, and I got made fun of by like my cousins. And it's like embarrassing, that like I had to be in ESL or ELL, because obviously English is my second language, so at home when I
Mhm.
was a kid up to like, I started going to school, I was speaking with like Hmong. Um, so the fact that like my older cousins were making fun of me for speaking Hmong and not being proficient in English, when I was like in first or second grade, that made me not want to speak Hmong at all. So then
Right.
that's when I became like really rusty at it, and then I realized, dang,
Mhm.
I'm with me not wanting to speak Hmong or forgetting my Hmong language, it's hindering me from, talking to my grandma, like people who I love. So
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
in a sense, yeah, I understand what you're saying. Like the balance is hard. The
Mhm.
balance is
Yeah.
really hard. Mhm.
I want to bring attention to the fact that what you and I and like what I'm sure a lot of Hmong American people go through is we're dealing with the consequences of assimilation. So we're trying to like assimilate and fit into the dominant white American culture. And for me, I think it's important to bring attention to the fact that like that is the larger system that we are dealing with. Like that's what we live under. And so it's not just like an individual moral failure that we are like not in touch with our own culture. Like I think it's really important that we have to really pin this on white supremacy and assimilation. Like it's not our fault individually. It's these larger systems that we are dealing with.
Mhm. Yeah. to kind of go with that, like I've heard from a friend of mine that who does not really know how to speak Hmong. I asked them, I was like, hey, like growing up, like have you never spoke Hmong like at home? And they told me it's because their father wants them to speak English only because in America, that's the only language you speak, right? So
Mhm.
I get your point in terms of like it's not just like an internal thing, it's external too. Like we need to realize and
Yeah.
see that, the world we live in or like the country we live in, they are predominantly speaking English. So we have to understand and know how to speak English to be able to be successful in life.
Mhm.
And that sucks because, you know, that also plays a role of like how you present yourself externally.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes when I, step foot outside of my house and I just like go to like the store or even at work, or like in school back then, I feel like even if I show one piece of my Hmong heritage, then I feel like I will get like ostracized by the
Right.
community, and that
Mhm.
sucks.
Yeah. I also
Mhm.
want to bring attention to the fact that like assimilation is a survival tactic that like people of color have to deal with as, just being in this country. It's a survival tactic. So yeah, it's not always because we're doing it because we hate our culture. It's just like that's unfortunately what we have to do to navigate living in this country, and what we have to do to like find success in this country is to like be more Americanized. But it's a survival tactic, and so I also just want to call attention to that as well.
Yeah. And I also want to bring up that this one time, I was hanging out with a group of my friends, and they all had Hmong names, right? So this one time, they were like, "Oh, Jessica, it's easier for you to find a job because you have an American name," and that to me kind of made me feel a little dismissed because it's like, so you're saying that my hard work of going to school, working at these different jobs did not get me to where I am today, but it's more so my name. But like I do understand where they're coming from because, with me working in the recruiting world, it's true. People who have a foreign name as their legal name, they often just say, oh, like for example, let's say if my name is like um Banjai or something, right? Like
Hmm.
Panjai, like, people are not gonna, like or, like, white people are not gonna be able to, um, pronounce that correctly. So then but Panjai would just be like, "Oh, yeah, my name is Panjai, but just call me Mary," you
Hmm.
know? And this sucks, it's like, why do we have to cater? Why do we have to cater
Right.
to people? Like,
Hmm.
why can't they just learn my name? So,
Hmm.
like, I get where they're coming from, but at the same time, I felt like, dang, like, I kinda wish my mom would have named me a Hmong name too.
Hmm.
That's just my story.
No, yeah, I think that's important to talk about. I guess from your friend's perspective, it's like easier for you to assimilate because you have an American name, or like it's easier for
Mhm,
me to assimilate because I have an American name. Whereas
mhm,
um, it is like a privilege in that sense where we have American names. So that is something
mhm.
that like I will recognize. Like we do have that privilege where like
Yeah,
people are probably less likely to judge us based on our first name.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, like, I agree with what my friend said, like, I get it, like, yes, I do have that privilege because I have, like, the freaking whitest name out there, Jessica,
Mhm.
But at the same time, it's like, dang, it made me feel, like, bad for having a name, like, as
Mhm.
something that I couldn't even control. So,
Right.
like, yeah, I remember, like, going home and asking my mom, oh, I was like, like, "Why did you decide to name me Jessica?" Um, she didn't really have an answer, like, she just said, "Oh, because I like the name." That's pretty much it. Like, there's
Mhm.
no other intention behind naming your kid,
Mhm.
or, like, giving your kid an American name. But,
Mhm.
yeah, that's an experience that I feel like I will always remember, um, because, like, in a way, it did hurt me a little bit. Like, I
Mhm.
understood it, but it also hurt me too.
Yeah. I think it's
Mhm,
important to highlight that like everybody experiences internalized racism differently. Like it presents itself differently in me than it does to you, than it does to your friends. And I think what's important overall is that we all validate each other's experiences and that we all understand, like, yeah, we are all dealing with internalized racism, but it just manifests differently in all of us. But it's still
Mhm.
internalized racism. And it's
Yeah.
still, our experiences are valid, all of our feelings are valid.
Mhm.
So yeah, we just have to understand, like, yeah, we're all dealing with the same thing. It just looks different.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I do know earlier we talked a little bit more about like, gender roles and like the patriarchal side of like a Hmong community. So just a question I have for you is that like, are there any like specific mental health struggles that you as a Hmong woman face due to like conflicts between like traditional gender roles and the modern societal expectations?
Mhm. So I will say that my parents raised us pretty Americanized, so I didn't deal with like the pressure to adhere to traditional Hmong gender roles as a lot of other Hmong women deal with. And I am very grateful for that. And I do recognize my privilege in being grown up that way because I honestly don't think that um, I felt too much pressure to adhere to like the Hmong gender roles. I think I just felt like a lot of my mental health issues stem more from like balancing my Hmong American identity. But the gender
Mhm.
roles weren't really something that have affected me too much. Um, they might have affected my older sister more because she was the oldest, because I'm the middle child. So maybe that's another reason why too, because I'm not the oldest daughter. But I know like you're the
Mhm.
oldest daughter too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it really affected me. But yeah, like let's say, I mean, thank you for acknowledging that. Um, but hypothetically, if you did experience that, like what do you think the challenges may have been for you?
I mean, I still experience like a little bit of like being pushed to do like the cooking and cleaning or like always washing dishes at family parties while like my boy cousins or like uncles, they just get to like sit and drink. So I feel like that's the most that I would have experienced the gender roles being put on me. But I am very grateful that my parents, they never were like, oh, like you need to get married, or like you need to have kids. Like they really encouraged me to like get an education and to like live my
Mhm,
own life and do my own thing and like follow my own journey.
mhm.
So I am really grateful for that.
Wow, I'm happy for you. That's good. It's good to hear that, parents like there are parents out there who encourage their kids to go out of their way and live their own life and like not have anybody control them. Because for me specifically, like me being the oldest, it does play a huge role as well. But the mental health struggles that I face, with the conflicts between the traditional gender roles and the compared to like the modern societal expectations, it's it has affected me like greatly. Because let's say I step outside my house, I go out there and I do whatever I want. I'm a free woman. Because like I'm not gonna lie, in today's like society, women, they are, you know, they are the ones, like, ruling shit right now. Well, okay, I don't wanna
Hmm.
say ruling, but, like, they are the ones who are, thriving,
Hmm.
they are the ones who are doing great things out there. I mean, no shame to the men, like, you guys are doing good things too, but, I mean, I think it's just good to acknowledge that, like, women being oppressed for such a long time, they're going out there, they're thriving, and then I'm following my dreams outside of this house, but right when I come back home, I feel like I'm caged up again.
Oh,
Because yeah, because, like, like, it's just me and my brother home now, and my parents, like, they're always at work, so it's just me and my brother and then, like, my grandma. My grandma, she's still very, very old school, very traditional, and my brother, he doesn't work on Fridays, but I do, so every time I come home on Fridays, my grandma would be like, "Oh, Jessica, like, take him to the store to buy some food or buy some snacks." I'm like, "Bro, like, my brother was home, like, why didn't you just ask him?" And she'd be like, "Well, because he's a boy. I can't ask him to do, stuff, so I always wait for you." And it's like, Oh my gosh, like, that's exactly what I mean, like, outside of my house, I feel like I could do whatever I want, but right when I come back in, I feel like I'm back into this system that, well, my family believes in, which is very traditional and
Mhm.
patriarchal. So I guess the mental health
Yeah,
struggle will be like I feel a lot of pressure sometimes. I'm feel really stressed. And again, with me being the oldest child too, and I'm a daughter, a lot falls on my shoulder.
right.
So like when my younger siblings don't do anything, or when my parents are out of the house, I have to step up. And I think that was what kind of forced me to grow up at an early age as well.
Mm,
So yeah.
yeah, I no, thank you for sharing, girl. Like
Mhm,
I don't have that experience of feeling like I'm caged up when I'm at
mhm,
home. So I definitely like empathize with like you and all other Hmong women who have to deal with that because I see how much pressure it puts on you guys or how
mhm,
hard it is to balance like your outside life versus your home or versus your life
mhm.
at home.
Yeah.
Or like, but I did see that with like my extended family, like my cousins were like they would invest in their sons more than their daughters. So that was kind of like the closest that I ever got to see it growing up was just like, um, yeah, that they would invest in their sons and not as much as in their daughters, or
Mhm.
like they wouldn't let their daughters do as many things as their sons would. So that was like the closest that I saw it in my family.
Yeah. It's sad to see, like, even to this generation, it still happens.
Right.
It's
Mhm.
sad, but
And they're more Americanized too, and they still do it. So I was like, wow,
yeah.
like you guys still do it, and you're pretty Americanized too.
Mhm,
Or just the way that they favor their sons over their daughters. Like I
mhm,
grew up seeing that a lot, and I saw the way that it hurt my family members really badly.
mhm. Yeah, 'cause it makes you feel less than it makes you feel less than, period. It makes
Mhm.
you feel less than anybody
Right.
else, and, like, nobody would wanna feel that way, you know?
Yeah.
Um But yeah, this is a pretty tough topic to
Yeah.
talk about, but I'm glad we're talking about it now. So obviously, finding support is really important when you're dealing with a lot of mental health challenges, right? So how did you find support when dealing with like, any mental health challenges or just even having like an identity crisis? Like, were there any like cultural or community barriers that kind of made it more difficult for you?
So the way that I found support, like in my personal mental health healing journey, what helped me a lot was getting into artwork and creativity, like getting into my creative side. So I started like writing poetry. That really helped me process my emotions a lot. And then also I've been getting into like creating collages too, just to get my hands moving. And I like art a lot. And so I really enjoy learning about the Hmong culture through art. So learning about things like Bambao or like Kutsia or like, I don't know, just like I love learning about our culture through art, whether it's through like different forms of art or like the history behind certain art forms. That's kind of how I like to learn about the Hmong culture is through art. And I also really like to like follow other Hmong American artists too. And a lot of Hmong American artists create artwork based on like their Hmong American identity. So that's also a way for me to learn more about other Hmong people's experiences too, is through the artwork that they create and that they share with the world and just tell their life stories through their artwork. So I really enjoy connecting with the Hmong culture through art.
Mhm. Yeah, art is a very powerful tool, I feel like. So I'm glad that you found that your safe space there. I'm not a very artistic person. So I don't do a lot of like drawing or, writing music or whatever, but like I back then I used to Hmong dance a lot. So whenever I like, am feeling down or whatever, I'll just like put on a Hmong song and dance to it, like create my own choreography. I think that's a way to help me cope with it. Um, But I stopped doing that because, I got old and my bones don't work the same way anymore. They be cracking, girl. So, what I do now is I like to journal, I like to read, and I also like to talk to, like, family members or friends who may be, going through the same thing as, I am, because maybe sometimes you just need that companion to, um, be on the same ship as you and talk about it, you know? So,
Hmm.
that's a way for me, an identity crisis, have you ever experienced that? Like, an identity crisis?
Yeah, I think so. Just like with the internalized racism, and then in my process to deconstruct the internalized racism, I'm like, okay, like now that I know that it's not my individual fault that I have internalized racism, now what am I going to do about it? And so it's like, okay, like now it's my responsibility to reconnect with the culture. So I'm still defining what that looks like for me, and just trying to remind myself all the time, like I am Hmong enough, even if I don't speak Hmong, or even if I'm not interested in like certain traditional Hmong things, or if I'm into like maybe like weird things that like other people might not be into, like I'm still like Hmong enough, even if I have interests that other Hmong people are interested in or something like that. And then also another thing that kind of supported me through like reconnecting with the culture was my senior year of college. For my international studies class for our capstone project, my research project was about how Hmong American artists combine traditional art forms with more modern art forms as a means of preserving the Hmong culture. And so, like, two prominent examples of artists that I like researched were Tu Saiko Lee, who he's like a Hmong American rapper, and he grew up in like the hip hop era, I believe, and so he was really into rapping. And then his grandmother was like, "Oh, like you do rapping? Like I sing kutia, like that's similar." And so he combined kutia with rapping, and I was like, "Wow, that's so cool that like he combined the traditional Hmong art form with like a more modern art form as a way to like preserve the culture, but still kind of like transform it into its new thing while still honoring the Hmong culture too." So he's a great artist. And then um, the other artist, another artist I talked about in my research was like Meng Nao, how like he produces a lot of content about like traditional Hmong instruments, and I think it's cool because he presents the information and the history and the cultural background about these Hmong instruments in a way that's accessible to like younger or more modern audiences through like YouTube videos or like posting on Facebook. So I think it's cool that like these different artists are finding ways to preserve the Hmong culture, still in this modern world.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm glad you brought artists up because, they have such a great impact and influence, especially to the younger generation now. So I'm glad that, you got the chance to research about them and see that, they're able to still preserve the Hmong culture because honestly, I feel like our Hmong culture is fading. I'm not gonna lie. Personally, I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it is fading. Um, because a lot of factors goes into it, like,
Right.
yeah, we still do our tradition, like, our yearly New Year's to preserve our Hmong culture. At the same time, it's like a lot of people or a lot of kids these days, they don't really care for the culture anymore, and I think that comes with your, idea of that, internalized racism, but also the external part of it too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me
So
think about
mhm,
it makes me think about like when my dad's dad, when my grandpa he passed away, like my dad was telling me that my grandpa, he was so knowledgeable about the Hmong culture, but he never shared any of that knowledge to my dad. And like we don't know what the reason is, but it's like, yeah, I think part of it is because like the younger generation, maybe they don't want to know, but also like I'm not sure why the older generation may not want to share that information with them too, because they are the knowledge holders like of our
mm,
culture. They hold the wisdom of our culture. So I guess it's like maybe they have to feel empowered to want to educate us too. And maybe they
Mhm.
don't feel empowered. Maybe that's why they didn't share or something.
Wow, yeah, that's a good point too. I think it goes both ways, honestly, and I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of generational barriers as well, you know?
Right.
Like, with the younger generation not knowing how to speak Hmong, can't really talk to the older folks, but then also the older folks, they're kind of like, "Oh, it's whatever, they're not interested about it anyway, so I'm not gonna talk like, tell them."
Right.
So, there's a lot of barriers, and it's gonna I don't even know if we'll ever find a way to close that. Like, what are
Mhm.
your thoughts on that? Like, do you think we can ever close that barrier?
We just have to empower everyone to want to learn and to share information. So I
Mhm.
think that's where it starts, is like just empowering other people to want to connect. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
true. That's true. Yeah, everything starts with, will, right? Like, if you have a will,
Right,
you have a way. There's that saying. So it's
right.
like, are these kids or these elders, are they willing to be open to talk to each other? But
Hmm.
I
Right,
don't know.
right.
There's a lot
And
to that.
not
That's a whole
just
different topic.
right, like not
Mhm.
just give up easily, but like also, I don't know. Yeah, that's a whole other topic
Yeah,
to
that
talk
is a
about,
whole
but
nother topic. Yeah. But okay, thank you for sharing, your thoughts and experiences, especially talking about like identity crisis. Because personally, I've gone through it too, and it's not the best feeling. But eventually, you pick yourself up and you learn as you go. Um, so what has helped you, find that peace and clarity when going through an identity crisis, and how has that impacted your mental well being?
Mhm. I think what has made me feel at peace is just knowing that like me being feeling like ashamed of being Hmong and wanting to distance myself from my Hmong culture, like it's not an internal individual moral failure of myself. Like it's these larger systems, white supremacy, racism, assimilation, like needing to survive in this country. Like those are the reasons why I'm dealing with this. And so it makes me feel like, okay, like it's not my fault. Like I am simply like a victim of these systems
Mhm,
that we are living under. So that has helped me feel more at peace because I know like it's not something that's wrong with me. Like I'm just living in a world that makes me feel this way, and this is how it's
mhm,
manifesting in me. So that's what has made me feel like more at peace. That those feelings of shame and guilt, like it's not my burden to bear.
mhm.
So that has helped my mental well being a lot.
Wow, I love that. I love that you're able to acknowledge it because, obviously some people, it's hard for them to accept it, right?
Right,
So I'm glad that, you accept that it's not your fault. Because it's true. I feel like a lot of these thoughts that we have, especially relating to our like, culture and who we are and stuff, it's really not our fault. A lot of
right.
factors come like play into it. And it gets messy, right? So it's not entirely your fault. It's not your burden to bear. And I'm glad that you're able to, find your peace, and come to terms of like who you are as a person and human being. So like, what is your advice to people out there who are still struggling to, be at peace with their own identity?
Hmm. I think I would just say, like, yeah, it's not your fault. Like, it's not your fault that you're in America. It's not your fault that the Vietnam War happened. It's not your fault that the Secret War happened. It's not your fault that the Hmong people had to come to America to seek refuge here. It's not your fault that white supremacy exists. It's not your fault that racism against us exists.
Mhm,
Um, and it's not your fault that your survival tactics may manifest in you being disconnected to the Hmong culture. I guess I also want to
mhm,
highlight too, like, because I mentioned that I learned about internalized racism in college. So I had that privilege of going to college and taking that class to learn about internalized racism. So I feel extremely lucky and grateful that I learned about internalized racism there because I recognize that not everybody has the privilege to get a higher education or take a class where they will learn about racism. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I just wanted to say that too. Like I recognize my privilege in being able to even go to college and access that knowledge. And I'm hoping now that like with social media, there's more information floating around on social media. So that's why I want to call attention to the term internalized racism so that hopefully if any listeners have not heard of that before, like hopefully this will inspire you to learn more about that.
Yeah, and I think that, like, everything starts with just learning or, like, gaining new
Mhm,
knowledge. I think once you
mhm,
start learning about, yourself more or even, like, um, internal racism, you learn a lot about yourself too, like, everything falls
right.
into place. So,
Mhm.
I'm glad that, with you learning or taking that college course, it allowed you to, find out who you are.
I do have, I want to add more to my advice too.
Mhm,
So some more advice I would give to other Hmong Americans who may be struggling with this is that like if you're like me and you were only exposed to the bad sides of the culture, I just want to say like there are good, beautiful parts of our culture. I know it may be hard to believe if you've never been exposed to those parts, but I hope you can one day find all the beauty in our culture. And so I would just encourage you to try to find ways to learn about the culture in a way that is meaningful to you. So for me, it's learning about our culture through art. Like that's meaningful to me. That's what resonates with me. And that's what I find the most interesting. So find whatever way of learning about our culture that is most interesting to you. You know, even if it's like through sports or something like that.
mhm.
Just find your way of trying to connect with the culture.
Yeah, sports, going to fairs,
Right.
food, people who like
Right.
food. Yeah, there's a lot of ways to reconnect yourself with, the Hmong culture.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing.
But yeah, I guess like um or even if you're into like reading webtoons or something, like there's literally a webtoon that I'm reading right now that is created by a Hmong artist. And even then I'm able to learn about Hmong culture through that. It's called Reeds. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's really
Read.
cool. So I'm yeah,
Who's it
Reeds.
who's it by? Because I wanna read that. That sounds
Yeah.
interesting.
Their name is Izzy. Their Instagram is ZZ_sleeps. Um,
Okay.
So yeah, even reading that is like a way for me to learn about Hmong culture. Okay, disclaimer though, it's like a BL webtoon. But hey, we need the representation of BL Hmong boy, okay?
Hey, okay, we need to normalize it. It's okay,
Yeah,
See, like, this is what I mean,
and
like,
that's
I don't
what I'm
understand. Oh, yeah, I was like, I don't understand why it's so taboo for
mhm.
us to talk about things like this, or, like,
And
even
that's
see, like, BL webtoons.
right, like that's why I'm so grateful for like so many Hmong artists because it's like we may do things, we may have interests that aren't like that like a lot of other Hmong people might not be into, or like we may have interests that are out of the norm or not traditional. But it's so nice to see that there is representation in spaces like BL webtoons or in hip hop or in like breakdancing, things like that. Like it's cool to see that there's Hmong representation out there, or even like gymnastics or acting in Hollywood on Disney Channel, Brenda Song. Like,
Period.
dude, oh my gosh, that's something I want to talk about. Did you grow up watching Disney Channel?
No.
Okay, like, so I watched a lot of Disney Channel as a kid, and I remember when I was really little, the Disney Channel movie Wendy Wu Homecoming Warrior came out,
Oh,
and
I do know that movie, though. Mhm.
Brenda Song starred in that movie. And I remember in one of the commercials, she explained her cultural background. She was like, "Oh yeah, I'm Hmong," and she even literally said in the commercial, she was like, "Gulumbe ya Brenda," and I remember as a little kid being like, "Wait, this is on Disney Channel?" Like a Hmong actress is on a huge Disney Channel show, Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. She's starring in a movie, Wendy Wu Homecoming Warrior, and she's talking about Hmong culture on national TV, and she just spoke Hmong on national TV. Like that was something that was so cool to me that I couldn't even wrap my head around it as a kid because I was like, we just like the Hmong people just came here in the 70s and we already have a Hmong actress on TV in the 2000s. Like, that's amazing. So that was like
Mhm.
a really pivotal moment for me to see that commercial that she did. You can still find it on YouTube too. I watch it sometimes. It's
Wow.
really, really cool that we had that representation, like in the 2000s.
Mhm. Yeah, like, talking about representations, I think is really important, like, you think you're alone, you think that the world, like, you don't feel a place of belonging, right? And then once you see, like, a really successful, like, famous actress or a really well-known gymnast, Sunisa, um, or, like, the first K-pop star, Lexi, like, you see all these Hmong people that are doing well, then that they are representing you or, like, your culture in a higher level, stage. It makes you feel really proud, and honestly, like, when Lexi when she got picked to be in that K-pop, group.
Bicha?
Oh, yeah, Vicha. Yeah, Vicha, I freaking cried, and, like, I didn't even know why I cried, but I think it was so healing to see. So I'm glad that, these women are out there representing us and doing well, and it makes me feel really, really proud too.
Hmm. For
Yeah.
sure. Yes. Representation is so important, like even on a smaller level. For example, like my sister, she's a teacher at a high school, and her Hmong girl students love her so much. Like they always talk to her. They're her favorite teacher. And I think that's so cool that these teenage high schoolers have a Hmong teacher that they can look up to and that they can talk to about literally anything, whether it's school or personal life. Because my sister's Hmong too, so she understands like the cultural things that they're dealing with. I think that's so cool because for me, I never had a Hmong teacher. And I'm like, if I did have a young woman Hmong teacher, yeah, I'd probably be like all up in her face all the time too. Like she'd probably be my favorite teacher too, because that representation matters so much. Like I don't know, I'm just
Mhm.
like, wow, like they're really lucky to have her as a teacher because for me, like I know it would have been really cool if I had a young woman teacher. Like I probably would have loved that because then they understand you better too.
Mhm.
Like, yeah. So I just think like representation at all levels is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, I went to a Hmong school, but then the thing is, most of our teachers were predominantly white. Yeah, and so we did have some, like, Hmong teachers, but I feel like it compared to, I was like majority of the teachers were white. So, like, the Hmong teachers, yeah, like, they were there for us, but then at the same time, the fact that it was a Hmong school, the only representation that I really felt were from the students. So kind of going back to what you said about learning your Hmong culture through art, are there like any specific like artworks that you're kind of looking at right now, or any specific art projects that you're doing?
Talking about my Hmong American experience is like a core part of my art, so it's like always integrated it into my artwork somehow. I'm never gonna shut the fuck up about my Hmong American experience and my artwork. Like, how could
Mhm,
I? Like, that's a core part of my being. That's always going to be integrated into my artwork somehow.
mhm,
It's always going to be integrated into my life all the time. Like, I'm never going to disconnect myself from that.
mhm.
But I have made a couple art projects really about like processing my Hmong American identity that I would love to share with you some poems.
Okay.
So this first poem is titled Restoration, and it was also like a video project that I collaborated with the artist Fumi Bean, who's another Hmong American artist. She created like the animation, the video for this, but I'll just read it for you, and then maybe I'll like link the
Mhm.
video below too. But this poem is more about like collective healing for the Hmong people. So this poem is titled Restoration. Sacrifice of life in the fight for what is right. Slipping from mother's grip, she swims desperately across the Mekong. Wailing cries sound as hands grasp on to loved ones. For once the bus leaves, the family may never be together again. Opposing ideologies, pro-communism, pro-democracy, traditional versus new religion, shamanism, Christianity, immigration to France, Australia, Canada, the United States, concentration in Wisconsin, Minnesota, California, diaspora, war creates. Contemporary public conversations that speak of the Hmong only in reference to the secret war, often recognized only in reference to the war, even though we have existed long before. Hmong history itself now split by war, but we are so much more. Like rips in a pandao, tearing the story of our people into fragmented parts, the secret war was a destructive force, tearing Hmong families, Hmong people, Hmong history apart. Like the work of many hands stitching the pandao back together, we must work to heal ourselves, to empower one another, to stitch back together and restore the fate of the Hmong, the story of our people.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love that. It just took, you know, us through the whole history of Hmong people
Mhm.
without the paragraphs.
Right.
So, like, I love that.
Yeah, because it's like, especially here in America, like anytime they ever talk about the Hmong people, it always starts with like talking about the Secret War, and it's like
Mhm.
that's doing
Um,
our culture and our history a disservice because our culture has existed way, way, way before the Secret War.
mhm. Like, it's not
Um,
even the beginning. The Secret War is not even the beginning of our Hmong culture.
right, right, and like our culture shouldn't just be centered around talking about the war too. Like we also need to talk about like the beautiful parts of our culture or like other parts of our culture that don't have anything to do with the war.
Mhm.
But yeah, that poem was mainly about like the importance of collective healing for our people.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I can't wait to see the video, and
Yeah.
I would yeah, and, like, I will link it, as well if for whoever wants to, you know, watch the video that Cassandra created and collabed, on. I would link that, so feel free to go and watch it.
Mhm.
You have any other poems you wanna share with us?
Yes, I do have another poem. So, this next poem, I wrote it as my final project for this art program that I did. It was
Mhm,
through the nonprofit called the Seed Project based in St. Paul, Minnesota. And the
okay,
program was called the Southeast Asian Change Lab. And so it was a program for young adult Southeast Asian diaspora um, to learn about like art and advocacy skills or like learning to develop our arts and advocacy skills. So this is the final project that I created for it. So I wrote a poem and I created a collage for it, and I can share with you the picture of the collage too. So the title of this project is called "Your Face Looks So Asian," and it's about my Hmong American identity.
hmm,
The face I was born with comes from generations of weary hearts and frightened souls. Their pain I had always felt, like it was air that suffocated me. Outside, my breath still stolen, I was drowning in a white sea of hostility. Laughed at, talked down to, looked at with disgust, I learned early on this face was shameful, something to hide I must. Behind a mask, I felt at ease. I learned to become one with the sea because it was easier to breathe. It felt so good, the mask turned into a wall, camouflaged, surrounding me for extra safety. This was who I needed to be, detaching myself from those who made me me. So disconnected from myself that I had mistaken faint comfort for true security. Your face looked so Asian, a friend said one day. My face looks so Asian. What does that mean? Wait, shouldn't I look Asian? How do you see me? Not Asian? White? Raceless? Colorless? Invisible? The universe confronted me and said, if you don't want to be Hmong, I'll show you how it feels. I felt so seen and yet unseen. My wall was destroyed. I thought it was protecting me, but once the walls came down, I was actually free. Inciting my journey on the path to release myself from negative self perception, absorbing moments for self reflection, accepting my shame and insecurity for what they are truly manifestations of internalized racism ever learning to embrace them, major complexities of my identity. My face I was born with shows a direct image of my lineage, a symbol of love stories and resiliency, to be worn with honor. To be Hmong is to walk the paths created by those before and stray from them to blaze the trails onward, reclaiming what it means to be Hmong. So yeah, my face should look Asian. Fuck you mean? Somebody really said that to me.
Oh my gosh. Wow, I have goosebumps right now. That was beautiful. I love that. Like, I don't know, hearing that, like, it's so relatable, and it's sad that, like, people come up to you and be like, "Why is your face Asian?" No, shit, 'cause I am.
Right?
Well, yeah, and, like, first of all, how does the Asian face look like?
Right,
You know? Like,
right.
oh my gosh, wow, I'm so sorry that, that happened to you, but damn, that poem is powerful as fuck, like, oh,
Yes,
girl, I'm so proud of you.
thank
I'm so
you.
proud yeah, that was very, very powerful and very emotional too, and, like, I can see why it, affected your mental health so much, because, like, no one should ever get asked the question, like, "Why is your face so Asian?"
Mhm,
That's just so rude, and that's something that nobody should ever ask anybody like that. Like, you don't just go to someone and be like, "Oh, why is your face so white?"
yeah,
Like,
honestly,
"Why is
girl,
your face Caucasian?"
like, going back to the question you asked me earlier, that was my identity crisis. Because
Mm,
I was, like, working so hard to try to, like, distance myself from being Hmong, but then being confronted with that question, I'm like, "Oh, wait, so first of all, you guys do see me as Asian, and second of all, I guess my, like, camouflage mask isn't working. Like, you guys
mm,
still see me as Asian." So that definitely gave me, like, an identity crisis because I was like, "Okay, like, I'm trying hard not to be Hmong or, like, not to be Asian, but, like, you guys still clearly see me as, like, different or, like, beneath
mm.
you." So, yeah, that was, like, my identity crisis.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Wow.
Yes.
I'm processing this. This is a lot to take
Yeah, honestly, like, poetry helps me a lot to process my emotions, and
That's
there's
good.
things that can be said in a poetic way that just can't be explained
Mhm.
in, like, a different form of writing, like, more, like,
Mhm.
academic writing or, like, technical writing or, like, being, like, more direct in your writing, like, sometimes it's just better to explain things in a more poetic way because it gets the point across
Yeah.
better or, like, the feelings across better.
Yeah, and you know what's crazy? Like, a lot of the elders, they explain themselves in a very poetic way too. And,
Mhm.
I feel like that's very powerful because poems or poetry, art in general, is such a free way to express yourself. Like,
Mhm.
you're expressing yourself without directly expressing yourself, you know?
Right.
So, I find that really amazing, and I'm glad that that's helping you. And just for people out there, if poetry is not your cup of tea, like, don't feel like, it works for you. It may work for some people, but not for you.
Mhm.
You can
Yeah.
try other things too. Like
Mhm.
like what I said, you can try journaling. That's what works for me. And the thing about journaling is that, like, it's not like an essay that you have to like, it's not structured. You can do it however you want. You can paint, you can, write music or even like cook. Yeah, whatever floats your boat. So just want to reassure you all out there too. So to kind of conclude this episode, I'm really thankful and grateful, and I appreciate you, for coming on here and sharing your experiences with us. I feel like it's your insights are I always value insights, because I feel like you've gone through so much. You're so educated and so passionate, especially in this topic. Um, but I do want to end off with a quote because I love quotes. So this quote is by Unknown. I just found it online. And it says, "The greatest challenge in life is discovering who you are. The second greatest is being happy with what you find." So, quickly, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's definitely like a two-step process. For me, I will say like I do feel like I'm in a place where I'm like at peace with who I am. It's like
Mhm,
I fully embrace like all of my imperfections, but I still really care a lot about like growing and evolving and getting to know myself deeper. So I think
mhm,
that's a good quote. Like, and also that quote kind of reminds me of the other quote that goes like, you can only know other people as deeply as you know yourself.
mm,
So it's really important to figure out who you are and find your sense of self and really
mhm.
love yourself and be happy with who you are.
Yeah. I love that you added that in because it's true, if you're not happy with yourself, you're gonna project that to other people.
Hmm.
So, this quote, it's really nice, like the greatest challenge in life is discovering who you are because that is a really big challenge. You often
Hmm.
wonder, like, who am I? Am I in the right direction? I don't even know who I am. And sometimes you fall into depression just because of
Hmm.
that simple question,
Right.
But then the second greatest thing is being happy with what you find. And
Hmm.
the second greatest thing is like a positive way of being the greatest thing, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I
Like
really like
the
this quote. Mhm.
mhm. Yeah, like for the first part of that quote, like if you don't know where to start to find yourself, start with your heritage. Start by
Mhm.
reconnecting with your culture because that will tell you everything you need to know about yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so we're gonna conclude this episode, but before we say our goodbyes, do you have any last remarks, Cassandra?
Um, I would just like to say thank you for having me on the podcast. I am not an expert in anything but my own life experience, as we learned from becoming certified peer support specialists. So um, I don't want you to think like, like I'm the smartest person in the world or something. It's just like this is all of the knowledge that I've gained from my own life. And I just
Mhm,
want to be able to share it with you all. But each of you are also the expert in your life experience, and
mhm,
every single one of you has so much valuable insight and wisdom to share. So
mhm.
don't be afraid to share it with the world.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. And again, I knew it was I wanted you on my podcast, one day or another, and I'm so glad it's today. And I'm so glad that, our lives we cross paths and, you're a really great friend of mine. So thank you so much for coming on here to share your experiences. I hope the audience, if you've listened this far, thank you so much for still staying on. And I hope that, some of the things that Cassandra and I talked about, it's something that you can relate to as well. Just want to remind you all that you're not alone in this journey. Healing, it takes a lot of steps and it can get messy, especially after finding out who you are and discovering who you want to be. So, to end this episode, I just want to say thank you all so much for your continuous support. Please follow me on Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify. And I can't wait to connect with you all again. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day and goodbye. See you guys next time.